to this impromptu Raku Q&A. I'm here to answer your questions. I hope you will have a question. Otherwise, I can wish you all a very good morning and everything. Blah, blah, blah. The weather's been not so good lately, but yeah. Okay. So, questions. Let me see if we have an extra micro.
I'm just doing some morning exercise. So who had the question?
Always I see Raku, I think it looks pretty, but I don't know where I can use it in a productive environment. Have you got some use cases or examples where you use it productive?
Microphone on its way back. Sorry, please hold on.
It's a pity that Stefan is not here yet. I hope he's not been suffering from the same thing that Jonathan is suffering from. But Stefan uses Raku in production at the company that he works with. And so that is an example. Frits Sauker last year at the Swiss Perl workshop actually gave a talk about how he is using then Perl 6, now Raku, in production for a client of his. So yeah, there are examples of it being used in production. Jonathan uses it in production for his clients. So there's at least 3 places in the world where it's been used in production. It's mostly things based on Crow that are currently in production. And one of the things that Jonathan recently made was the web app part of the Crow system. And why is he making that? Well, because basically he has a client for it. So yes, there's stuff in production. Hope that answers your question. I myself, I don't do production. I'm retired. Well, at the moment anyway.
I've been also running a very small Perl 6 based, it wasn't called Raku then, application in production. It's for Ovid's game that he teasered yesterday, Tau Station. Tau Station uses metric time in game, and there's a small web application that that converts metric time to the time we know it, and the other way around, and that's running in production for I think 2 or 3 years now. Two it must have been. Any other questions?
Yeah. What's the best place to ask for names for new models, modules for namespaces?
The best place for this, I guess if you want to have a quick answer. Good morning, good morning. Stefan, you are drafted here. Yes. If you want to have a quick answer, go to the Raku channel on Freenode. You could also ask your question on Reddit, Rakulang, and on Stack Overflow, Raku tag. You should get an answer within a day or so on those places. But we don't actually have a dedicated place for asking module names. The thing is that in Raku it is not as important as it is on Perl, because in your use statement you can actually say, I want to use this module, I want to use that version with that API by this author. And lexically you can actually have multiple versions of the same module loaded at the same time in different scopes. So it is not that important. So we actually did not actually assign that much importance on it. So whatever makes you happy, we're happy with it. Yeah? Okay. You have something to say about that?
I had something to say. Oh no, God, okay. Someone asked that question in more VM yesterday, and it was about everyone's at the German Perl workshop. There might be a delay. This wasn't quite true, but yeah, it was given a reason for a delay because everyone's at the same conference. This place is popular. That's all I really want to say.
Okay.
About the IRC channel. Just do me a favor. If you ask a question on the IRC channel, try to stick around for an hour or two afterwards. It is somewhat incredibly frustrating. Someone asks a question and I know the answer, but he left 7 minutes after asking.
Well, so this is already the next question. Who would be the one to answer those questions about new namespaces on the IRC channel? Would it be you? Somebody. So, well, somebody undefined. Now, I'll have the last...
It's not that important. I mean, in the Perl ecosystem, it's first come, first served for a module name. And that's basically not the case for Raku.
Yeah, that's... well, it's... I'm not eager to please or find the first name or be the first in a new namespace, but I found that the whole tree of where there are hundreds of Perl 5 modules is missing in Raku. There is nothing, and you'll have it. I'll have the last talk of the conference, and you'll see it there. And I've code 2 subroutines, so it's time for the next module.
Next question.
Hi. So may sound like a stupid question, but is there a website you could recommend for Perl programmers who want to switch to Raku? So that highlights the differences that makes it easier to get into Raku when already knowing Perl 5.
Yes, there is.
There is? Where?
In our documentation, there's a whole section on how to get from Perl 5 to Raku.
And in 2018, I wrote a series of articles on opensource.com with exactly that subject. And I'm actually working on reworking those articles into a book. And I was waiting for the first Rakudo Star release that actually supported Raku, which is now here. So I should find the time to finish the book and bring it out there. So there will be something that is very specific. It's the original part of that book was for a workshop that I gave at the YAP-CNA in Salt Lake City. And that became a series of articles, and this now is becoming a book. Right?
Can you say something about the module ecosystem, and what do you think are the most critical modules missing?
Well, I would say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. In this case, the beauty is in the missing eye of the beholder. But yeah, different people miss different modules. There is a list somewhere that actually says the most wanted module list. I would not actually know exactly where it is, but I guess if you Google for Perl 6 most wanted modules, you'll find it. I don't think you'll find it on the Raku most wanted yet. Okay. So what I'd say it's missing is a lot of. No, I'm the wrong person to ask actually. Because yeah.
So since we at work use Raku in production already, I have a little bit more experience of what we are missing. What we do is mostly web apps, and for that, since they're of course database driven, I'm missing a good replacement for LibreX class. There is an ORM called Red, but it's still in heavy development stage, and I'm not sure I entirely agree with the design decisions the author made. Wherever there is something missing, we use inline Perl 5, which is kind of obvious since I'm the author, and I advertised it at work, and people surprisingly even believed me that this stuff would work and happily used it and ran into issues that I then had to fix. So the missing modules thing, yes, it's there, but it's also not as bad as it may sound.
Yeah, I'm a sysadmin, and I've seen that some people have started to port some POSIX functions or wrap them with native call. I did this too because I require localized time and date strings, and I'm wondering whether it would make sense to coordinate this so that more POSIX functions are ported in one namespace. And for example, I only wrap the things that I need, and maybe other people would need other things, and they could contribute that stuff.
So, why don't you start a POSIX module?
Yes. Why did you start a POSIX module, really?
But some people did independently, and I have that module, but I haven't published it yet because it lacks so many things. I only started with the things that I need, which is local functions and time functions.
Yeah, but that's open source. People have an itch and they scratch it, and basically that's how it works. So if you have a POSIX module out there and people miss functionality and they can do in PR, everybody's happy.
And not just that, even your very small part of a real POSIX module may help others to realize what they have to do to get the rest. So if you wrap one function, it's a perfect template for the next function, and people would know what to do, and they just have to send one pull request. A pull request is so much cheaper than having to create your own module, figure out how to upload this stuff and where to put if you're starting out. There's a lot of unknowns. A pull request is really easy compared to that. So just go. Push the stuff online. Increase our ecosystem.
And with regards to starting your own modules, there's actually a bunch of apps out there, and I have a preference for one of them. It's called App MI6, App : MI6 by Shoshi Kaji, and that basically makes it very easy for you. You say new distribution, you edit your file basically, you write your tests, and you say MI6 release, and we'll upload it for you to CPAN, and it will get into the ecosystem. It's really, really a no-brainer.
Any other question? It really is an ask me anything.
Are there some news about performance and performance issues?
Well, performance has been a sort of hot topic for ever in Raku. Pretty much since it started out with the original implementation in Haskell called Pugs, and then moved on to Perl, which was so slow. And then now the more VM version, which got performance improvements all the time. We've been working on this for 10 years or longer, and we will continue working on it. Back in 2015, when we released the first language version, despite us working on performance, up to that point, performance has not been the top priority. The top priority has been nailing down the language semantics and getting the language done and providing some implementation that's useful and sort of works. We do favor correctness over speed. But since then, performance has become much more of a priority. And it has been improved by several orders of magnitude for some use cases. Others, not so much. So if you're interested in Raku performance, look up anything Jonathan has done. Go to Jonathan's website. He has lots of presentations about this topic. You can learn what we're doing and where we're succeeding. For example, we are now faster at creating objects than Perl 5 is. And not just Perl 5 with Moose, even Perl 5 core. So just blessing a hash in Perl 5 is slower than creating an object in Raku, which is a big step forward. On the other hand, if you do if you use regexes and grammars and, for example, grab stuff out of log files with millions of lines, you're gonna be hugely disappointed. That's probably gonna be the next area that we're trying to attack, and even on this workshop we had discussions about what to do about it, and Liz is starting to look into it, so we're gonna improve that.
I'm continuously looking into this. Actually, I wreck a very nicely written Raku code and change it into NQP abominations to make things faster. The nice part about this is that in the past 6 months I've been able to actually revert some of these abominations and write Perl 6 Raku code again, and actually have it go as fast as it was with the NQP version. So it's continuously on my mind, and there's always new places where I find that we can actually squeeze more performance out of this. The only place that I cannot squeeze performance out of it is actually in the virtual machine. That is really up to Nick and Jonathan.
Well, I can remember the second thing, so I popped up, because he first of all said all the stuff about point classes, but I can remember something Jonathan said a day or two ago. So the internals, the backstory on this, the MoreVM virtual machine underlying things is written in C. It does have a JIT, a just-in-time compiler. Now, you think of a JIT as just-in-time compiler as a thing that makes machine code for the relevant CPU, but actually there's a whole lot more stuff you can do before that, where you take all the very generic code that is written in terms of this method calls this method, that calls this method, that calls this method, and you start to go, it always does exactly this. Okay, I shall make a different version of it that just inlines all of that, and a few other things, and all of that is CPU agnostic. You do all this kind of simplification work based on runtime, information you only have at runtime, and it's doing it in another thread, so as long as you've got more than 2 cores. Does your watch have more than 2 cores? Yeah, nearly every. This is how multi-core the world is. Anyway, you don't actually have to. It's only the very last step of turning it into machine code that gets you a bit more. That's the backstory on JITs. There is a JIT, but Bart Wiggins tends to work on it. Anyway, the interesting bit related to what you said about abominations and what made me realise this, Jonathan was commenting that it's getting to the point now where it's getting better to take some of the things that are currently written in C and convert them back up to NQP or even Raku code. Because at this point, firstly, it's easier to manipulate the data structures in Raku because it's a nice language rather than C, which is... but secondly, you can see... so much more is visible, trying to avoid a pun. So much, not meant to be a pun. So, it is possible to make better manipulations, and actually this whole thing about inlining, if the innermost thing is written as C code, it's completely opaque to the JIT system, whereas if you write it in what seemed like slow Raku code, by the time the JIT system has got to it and figured out that all you were doing was adding 2 integers, that's all the machine is doing. But it can put that in the body of the rest of your function. So it's getting to the point where Raku is faster than C once the JIT has done its magic, which is weird, but when you start to understand the details, and I'm sorry if I took too long to explain them and did it badly, that's what's happening. The other thing that Jonathan was working on was partial escape analysis. And I thought by that it meant, oh, it's a partial implementation. It's like a half-baked thing. Totally the other way. So escape analysis is officially the language allocates proper objects for everything you do, and then it disposes them with a garbage collector, and obviously that's a lot of work. Escape analysis is cheating. It's you go, well, I allocate this object here, and no, it never escapes. I know I always let go of it here. I can cheat. I mean, it says it's a full-on integer object, but I know they only use an integer. I'll just allocate a machine register. So that's escape analysis as part of optimization. So full escape analysis is you have to know that it never escapes. Partial escape analysis is highly sophisticated cheating. You see that by this code path, it never escapes, but if you take that branch, it does. So you put it in a machine register, and you put a guard point here that says, oh, bother, they've seen me, and it unwinds the escape analysis at that point. If you always take this bit, it's fast. So I'm not sure if it's cutting edge at the level of academic research hasn't done this, but it's certainly more sophisticated than I think some things like some Java virtual machines do. And he got somewhere with that in the past few months. So performance keeps getting better, and performance things multiply with performance things. Admittedly, like it's 1.1 times 1.1, but if you do enough 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1s, you get to a relatively big number. That was a long talk. Hey, another one.
Yeah, I also have something to add which relates to the talk that Jonathan actually wanted to give today. And that is one of the performance problems is that by the time that the code actually reads the MoreVM bytecode, we have sometimes lost too much information about what the high-level code actually wanted to do. And to remedy that, Jonathan wanted to introduce a new abstract syntax tree in the compiler and actually use the use case of macros as an excuse to do that. But one of the implementing macros is a very nice benefit of that. But one of the other key points is that when we get to the optimization stage, the more we know about the high-level code, the better we can reason about it. And so the plan was to keep around the richer AST much longer. And that's what Jonathan wanted to tell us about in his bait and switch talk, as he called it himself, or that pretended to be about macros, but it's actually about a planned refactoring of the Raku compiler to make of Rakudo to actually make it faster in the end. Okay.
And I'd like to add to that Jonathan said once his voice is back, he will actually make a recording of the presentation so that we actually be able to see it. Because he really was very upset by the fact that he had to do so much preparation for something that didn't happen. So he really wants to give this talk. So, yeah.
So now we've been rambling a long time about performance, but this is a question and answer. So let's ask questions like, where do you want to see better performance in Raku? Nowhere. So we're done.
Grammars, I think that this is a...
You already mentioned missing modules in the eyes of some people. I'd like to mention missing books. I intend to introduce apprentices to programming using Raku. Once I get around to knowing it sufficiently that I can do it sensibly. And where should I look for introductory stuff besides the documentation that lists a number of articles and books?
So while I'll carry the mic, I actually take a stab at the answer myself. There's a book called Think Perl 6 by Laurent Rosenfeld, and it is aimed at complete novices for programmers. It's inspired by a book of a similar title, Think Python, and adapted by permission of the author to Perl 6, now Raku. And it's a very comprehensive and I think good book. I proofread about half of it, so I try to make it at least a bit better. And then there's also other books at higher levels, but I think for apprentices, that's what you want to go for.
And I actually proofread most of it. And it's available for sale over there. So you can, yeah, there you go.
Any other questions?
Sorry, you asked the wrong question with performance, and now once I got started, I can't stop. That's the result of thinking about these things for years. So really nobody did answer my question about where would you like to see better performance. And this tells me two things. Either they were already mentioned by us, so you didn't bother, or you haven't tried it and run into performance issues. And I will get back to you So let me tell you about what I'm seeing. Since I mentioned we're using Raku in production and doing web apps, and surprisingly to me, since I've been thinking about these things for so long and knew that Raku was so slow for so long, performance has not come up in any way. We're quite satisfied with what it's doing. We don't see a huge difference to Perl 5 that makes us, oh, maybe it's not ready yet. Things just work. We're not talking about millions of users here. It's certainly not ready for that, but your run-of-the-mill web app for, you know, normal user bases, it's totally fine.
So the answer to the question, where would I like more performance, would be an all-around everywhere, of course. I notice, well, I don't do Raku that much, but I notice that the startup time is slow, and if there's a lot to compute, then it takes a long time. And I haven't debugged it anymore because that is kind of a showstopper that lets me do the stuff in Perl 5 then.
When I ask you, can I ask you which startup time? The bare startup time or loading modules, or what is the...
Well, I didn't debug it yet, so I don't know. I
Okay.
just tried something out, and, well, I'm used to Perl 6 or Raku. Slow. And then I think that's just the case. It's still slow. Of course, I only loaded the newest release yesterday and haven't done much with it, so I may be all wrong.
When was the last release that you tried? What was the last release that you tried?
Well, the January release from this year, so...
Not a lot has changed since then. So, if you look at the bare startup time on my particular machine, it's about 120 milliseconds, which is like way more than Perl has for like 3 or 4 or 5 milliseconds on my machine. That is a point of attention that we all have. But I would also like to know that when you start up Raku, you get all of Moose and more completely available to you. And if you start up Perl 5 with Moose, you're in a similar ballpark anyway.
I seem to remember Jonathan's benchmarking on startup times and... Oh God, I'm going to be videoed, aren't I? The first thing, this was private conversations a while back as he was trying to optimize it. So the first thing was to beat the Perl 5 bare core at startup time. And then kind of the next few targets were, well, ultimately Perl 5 with Moose, but also believe it starts up faster than bare Python 3. Yeah, I haven't got a machine to test this on at the moment. I wouldn't trust that laptop even though I wouldn't. But yeah, it was like Python 3, Python 2 and Ruby were some of the other things to benchmark the startup at, and it's not that slow.
It looks like we're kind of spoiled here because Perl 5 has incredibly fast startup in the order of single milliseconds, and I don't know any other language besides the statically compiled ones like C that do this. Like Nick mentioned, Python is on the same ballpark as Raku here. Python 2 was, I think, twice as fast, so still 50 milliseconds till you get it up and running. So we're really spoiled here.
Yeah, I'm not sure, maybe Søren, if you upgrade to a new Raku version, all your modules in your home directory will be recompiled, and that takes time, and maybe that's what Søren encountered. And that's also what people told me. And my question is, how is that if you upgrade, I'm under the impression even if I recompile the same version, then and install that, then modules might be recompiled. How is that decided, and how are those IDs built?
Okay, know a little bit about that. It's all based on checksums. So the compiler itself has a checksum that is a SHA hash that includes all the source code for the compiler and the checksum for NQP, which the compiler is based on. So as long as this checksum is the same, we do not have to recompile anything. But if it changes, even because you add a space somewhere in the source code, we need to recompile all the world. And the same is true for your modules. We take a checksum of the module source code, and if that's the same, everything is fine. And we can use the precompiled versions of it. If it changes, we gotta precompile it and everything that uses the module. So in theory, if you're doing everything right, this is how it works. And if you reinstall the exact same version, you shouldn't have to precompile. But there's bugs. Compiling something includes running code like accessing hashes and serializing the contents of hashes, which means iterating over those hashes. But hashes are not ordered, so whenever you iterate over them, you may get a different order. And we've had a lot of cases where we iterated over hashes during compilation, so the result of the compilation will change. We've been fixing those and got it mostly right, but I'm pretty sure that there's at least one case left where compilation does not always give the same result. We have a test for this and it fails sometimes. Not very often, but you see the occasional failure there. So it tells me there's at least one issue left. And you will notice this by having recompilations when there shouldn't be some.
And there's also the fact that if you're coming from Perl, you're used to doing -ilib and stuff like that. You should really not do that for Raku if you can. The reason for that is that whenever you specify -ilib, all of the files of that directory and anything below that will be included in the checksum, because we have no knowledge of what the interaction is between the files in those directories. So if you have like a directory that has 1,000 files in it, and you mention that in your ilib, it will need to take a SHA from every of those files before it actually can determine if it needs to precompile anything again. If any of those files change, for instance if it's a log file or something, then you precompile them basically all of the time. So you have Zef is the tool to actually install modules. If you set things up with app mi6, then you basically have the whole structure of a module that you can install in cpan, even if you don't want to. But you can actually use that to install your module in your system as if it is a module on cpan. You can say zef install period. Basically, this is the distribution, and you can install that. And then it's basically safe from pre-compilation caused by changes in files in directories. And I would recommend that for any type of situation where you're basically rerunning a script more than once. You should basically install your module. And if you change your module, it will not pick it up immediately, so you actually have to force install it when you actually make changes. That's a little thing that you might want to remember in that case, but it will make things a lot faster for you.
The upshot is that if you have a rather large code base and you're loading hundreds of modules, then Raku may even be faster than Perl 5. We have code bases at work that are written in Perl 5 that take like 6-7 seconds to start up, and that's just compilation time because we're using all of cpan. But with pre-compilation, Raku can do much, much better here, and we have code bases that load like 200 modules, and it's done in half a second. So there's trade-offs everywhere.
I have a use case where I write a Perl script, Perl program, and want to give it to colleagues who do not have a Perl environment installed, running on a Windows machine. So I've been using some packaging tools for Perl 5. They got most of the libraries into it, but not all. How would I do that in Raku? Is there a way to do it on the level of the more virtual machine?
Well, the answer is you do it not yet. There's been I think a Google Summer of Code project from someone who wanted to get this done, and they came quite far, I think. It's just a matter of a little more work to actually pull it off. But I don't think there are any real large blockers in the way. But maybe you know better.
There's also a 21st century answer, which is use Docker. Yes, Docker works on Windows. You can simply build an image where you bundle Raku with your module or application, and then give somebody the Docker image, and then they simply pull it, and they don't even have to know which language it's written in. It's the ultimate fat packaging solution. Mic drop. Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much, everybody involved in the discussion and our panelists.